I'm Britton LaRue, and this is Moon to Moon. Moon to Moon is a space to consider, celebrate, and share the ways we come home to ourselves, anchor through change, and uncover our power. 1 month, one phase, one loving step at a time. Welcome to Moon. It's Britton. It's a Monday that I'm recording this episode. It's a moon in Aquarius, and it's nearly full. It's going to be full in 2 days in Pisces. Always excited for that one. Definitely one of my favorite full moons of the year. As a Pisces sun, it's just so sweet. And I'm nervous-sided, I can feel, to talk about what I want to talk to you about, which is the word witch. It's a powerful word. It is a dangerous word. It brings up a lot. There's a lot of distortion and there's a lot of projection around this word. So it's my highest desire to speak to you from just an authentic place of sharing with deep love and respect and wonder for the portal that is this word. And to help me speak to something that in many ways is unlanguageable and certainly could only very partially be spoken of by a single human being. I've invited some of my dear friends to share some of their own thoughts, and I'll introduce them in a bit, but there will be like a middle part of this episode that's not my voice, so that I can let this word speak through other mouthpieces, basically, through other spirits, through other humans. And we can only really know this word like through the holograph and the multidimensionality of all of us. So I'm very humbly desiring to speak what I want to say. This felt like an important, a risky, and a sincere contribution to what one might call the promo pathway to my new offering, Moon to Moon. This is a course, an online course that's going to be taking place in calendar time, September 11th to November 20th. So we're building towards this class. It's been such a fascinating time to be walking the promo pathway. Many of you know that I love promo. I find promo to be extremely magical, very creative, very fun, always a surprise, always a delight, also destabilizing, particularly for my inner children. So it's also a healing practice. Like promo is a healing practice because stuff comes up and then I see where I'm afraid, or I see where I'm unsure, and I get to those are discoveries to me. And so I also get to learn more about myself and about the love and care that parts of me are craving from me every single time I do a promo. And the truth is, just being in this work is a constant practice in loving myself in new ways, surprising ways, deeper ways. And in many ways, Moon to Moon, the course, is about that. It's about being alive in cyclical time as well as linear time, being with what shows up emergently, learning to love ourselves and have more compassion for the human experience, holding the past inside the present, and seeking wisdom from the future. So every promo is emergent for me, and I don't know what's going to happen. I just listen to what presents. And one of the things that has come forward is just being really soft and broadly compassionate to just like, how am I feeling? How are we all feeling right now? And what many of us are feeling has a lot to do with being in a Venus retrograde as well as being in a Mercury retrograde. So I'm so relieved that I prepared this really long promo space, because I couldn't do anything any faster than I am. And I'm moving at a way slower pace than the Aries rising parts of me like to operate in. I know that my unshaming commitment is quote unquote working, because my inner critic has not been super difficult to work with this slow pace. It's just felt so important that I tune in to my body in this promo and what my body says. And I feel like there's deep mists around Instagram right now. I start to go near it and it just turns into a no space for me. And so I just am okay, that's not where we're doing promo. What is the absolute minimum that maybe is one would do that, to let people know. And I'm hoping to have more of an encouragement and an illumination around Instagram in the next couple of weeks, now that regular enrollment is starting, because today, Monday the 28th, is the last day of early bird pricing. So if you're listening to this the day this is published and you want to do this class, it's a better price point if you get it by the end of today. I'll just remove early bird when I wake up tomorrow morning. The early bird price is a gift to people who don't need a lot of promo presentation. It's you just know. You just have a belonging to this. There's just a yes to this. The resonance is here. What are we waiting for, So thank you to those of you listening who want to play. This is going to be a dance. And I have scaffolding. I've been receiving lots of information about what it's going to look like. And I'm going to also be deeply listening to the way this wants to move through. I feel like I am dancing, and I'm just trying not to be awkward because I'm not leading, right? Oh my goodness, it's just such a I'm actually just really grateful for these retrogrades, because there's something about the energy that's soupier. Rebecca recently was like, I feel like I'm moving through molasses. It's like, yeah, I feel like I've been in molasses like since June. It's also like boiling here in North Texas, and like, how can anyone, like, how can we do anything in these conditions? It's so bad. It feels so gentle to just speak here in my own space, just feeling connected and sharing from my voice. And so that is the way that this promo is currently being unfolded, is where it feels easeful, where I'm not running into mists. It's just like the flow is moving. This is the channel the flow is in. Go in the get into the channel, right? And this is very much on point, because like, this is what we're going to be doing in Moon to Moon. The class is learning how to grow skills and practices to keep dilating this capacity for listening. But ultimately, what we're dilating is the capacity to trust. The capacity to trust that something is holding you and honoring that listening. And I've heard from many of you, such words, sharing how much last week's conversation meant to you. My conversation with Rebecca about intuition and the moonlit path. If you didn't hear it, Rebecca is the co-facilitator of this offering Moon to Moon, and we talked last week about her journey to being an intuitive astrologer and tarot reader and artist, to becoming a psychic, like a professional psychic, to now being a professional medium. And we talk about the distinctions of those terms. We talk about the different clairs, clairaudience, clairsentience, clairvoyance. These are things that we're going to get into in the class as well. It was just such a still point, this time with Rebecca. And it's basically always like this with Rebecca for me. I like feel all of my roots just drop in, and I feel so grounded into the moment I'm in with this other human being. And I'm so thrilled to be doing this with Rebecca for myself. And I am so thrilled for everyone participating in Moon to Moon to get to experience Rebecca. If you don't know her, she's just a really quite incredible human. So I told Rebecca a while back, I feel like I really want to talk about the word witch in the build up to the class. It just feels important to go there, but I was like, but I'm really scared, which means I should probably do it. And as often happens with the word witch, these mists appear, like these like pockets that enfold the word back in, and make it go away. Like witch is a word that, until it really locks in, is a word that wants to be pushed away by us, because there is so much energy around this word from centuries of violence, centuries of silencing. Centuries of invalidation, of obstruction, of shutting out. The throat clenches in memory of this. It is unspeakable. And so to speak it, it's sacred. Yeah, it really is. So, may I do this with honor and respect and care. Because there is a lot of violence around this word. A lot of pain. And most of us know this in our blood and to our bones. There's a lot of distortion. There is a lot of projection. And there is a lot of terror. There's also a lot of beauty, desire, dream, longing, and knowing. So I wanted to get close to this word because to not speak it is to participate in the silencing. It is my highest desire to do any service at all in clearing some of the distortion and revealing possibility for the wonder of this word witch. So what I'd like to do is just share Burden LaRue, some about my connection to this word, like what is in the energy behind me speaking it here to you. And then I would like to pass the mic around to some voices that I respect. Let them share. Let them speak words. And then I'll come back on the other side of sharing the mic with some weaving together around like a getting close to the word. What are some themes that are here between our voices? Fully respecting that there is a massive omission to this conversation, which is every other single being who resonates with the word witch and the way they would describe this, you know? So think like so many people, when I was little, I was deeply fascinated by witches. I wanted to be a witch. It was like they get to be that, is how it felt. They get to be so magical. They get to be not giving a fuck what we think about them. They get to be like night people, doing things in secret. They get to fly. They get to make things happen because they're cackling and willing it into being with their own spiritedness and their deep dedication to whatever it is that they want to see happen. They get to like speak secret languages. They just look so confident. That's so cool. And it, I think that so many kids, like, there's this kind of crushing sense of like, but it's not really true. That's not real. I was never afraid of witches. Like, I feel in my body the terror and the fear that other people talk about, but I was never really afraid of witches. I just gotta say, like, I think some part of me always knew that, like, there were lots of distortions going on, and like that witches weren't any more evil than any other like bad guy in a movie, and that, like, I personally didn't need to worry about witches, but I love horror movies. Like, I always loved getting scared for the fun of it, but I wasn't like I didn't actually experience programming from like caregivers or like really close family members that would make me afraid of this thing. It was more of like a cultural sense of terror that I felt, that I just didn't ever really resonate with. It was just more this feeling that, like, we don't live in a world that has magic anymore. I guess that's just the world we're in. I certainly felt like I certainly felt the invalidation, the silencing, and the violence of a world that didn't want me to be connected to my innocent beauty. So I see these as related now, the wounds of the witch through lineage and time, and the wounds of being invalidated as a woman. And we could talk about that for days and days and days and have a whole class around this, have a whole community of discussion around it. But the truth is, I don't see witch as a word reserved for specific kinds of people. It's like both and in so many ways. It's very slippery to me. Like, yes, we must acknowledge that the word witch is typically associated with a feminine magic maker, someone who's female identifying, and that the persecution of witches and witch hunts has a deep history in women's history. And I don't see witch as a word only for female identifying folks. I totally do not. I see it as a word for all bodies, every body. Also, another one like that, in both hands. Yes, there are lineages. There are specific lineages of study. There are specific lineages around teachings and gnosis. where you're like in a lineage of witch. Like, this is the lineage that I belong to. These are my teachers. This is how I was taught this, witchcraft. And in my other hand, I'm like, it is so much bigger than lineages. Like, this is so beyond certain teachings, certain teachers, certain like books that say this is what it looks like. No, it is so much bigger. It's like, it's not holdable to a set of rules, to like an aesthetic, a single aesthetic. It's not holdable to certain body types. It's not holdable to certain continents. It's not holdable to like certain professions. It's not holdable to like, oh, it looks like living in this kind of a place and not that kind of a place. It looks like doing these types of things and doing not these types of things. No, it is not holdable that way. This is a word, this is just Bryn LaRue talking. This is a word that's available in all bodies, in all ways. And what I've learned in getting close to it, which I didn't get anywhere near the thing until I separated from my ex-husband. As I released myself from all that energy holding me to this socially sanctified institution, as I released myself from like all the safety and security that I was guaranteed by staying hooked into this institution, so much became available to me. So much energy became available to me to be like, but what do I really care about? And just like the witch just came in like instantly. Within a week of initiating this process for myself, I was receiving a very sacred massage, and I saw a vision of a triple moon, which is the circle of the moon with crescents on either side, in just as a vision, and then had it tattooed on me before I even knew what a triple moon was, or the ways in which it's related to the word witch don't even matter. The point is, this just showed up the moment I was ready to release myself from certain powerful holds around my safety and security that I was relying on more than myself to validate me. And what I found is witch seems to show up for you when you want to practice self-validation, when you want to practice self-trust, when you want to let trust scaffold out into something very mysterious, into forces seen and unseen, into the animated interconnectedness of what we can see and what we can't see. When you want to start trusting in something, how you participate in your aliveness with all that, which appears for you and says, this is the way of being. And it's going to look very different to every person. There's my dog. Based on the kind of human you are, what you're into, how do you want that to look? That is completely unique. That is completely unique. So it just dropped in. Like suddenly I'm like at bookstores going to the metaphysical section, wondering what it might be like to check out a book and like have the person take my credit card and witness me buying books on witchcraft. Like, what would that be like? And like, what does it look like to just have these on my bedside table? These books. What's that like? What does it look like to think about what feels right to me here and what feels like more rules, you know? And what, for me, which has meant is that my relationship to this world, this word and world that is witch, is a emergent unfolding of me being in relationship to both me very internally and me being really in relationship with everything around me externally, to me being very in relationship to what is above me, and to me being in relationship to what is below me. And it unfolds as I listen, and it will just guide me. And I don't have to follow like rules perfectly. I just have to listen and trust. And what would that be like? So I keep learning. And, this is in many ways so much of what we're going to be doing in the class Moon to Moon. I'm not probably going to be mentioning the word witch, maybe ever. But for me not to say like, it's basically a witch class is also like silencing, because I just have so much respect for how uncomfortable that this might feel for some people. I know that some people listening to this may be like, yeah, duh, let's bring it. I'm so pumped. And other people, it's a spectrum. There may be some of you that are like, I don't know, I'm super uncomfortable now. I don't want to be anywhere near this word. This is terrifying. This is not who I am. And all of those feelings are welcome, Yeah, like there is so much intelligence behind being afraid of this word. There is so much intelligence in being afraid of this. There's like a lot of legit reasons to be afraid of this to your younger selves and maybe even to your present time self. There is a lot here to be afraid of, especially when we're afraid of being socially persecuted, kicked out, silenced, and violated. But I found that letting witch in, we begin to have the tools to not be afraid of that. Doesn't mean the fear goes away completely. I think we just get better at caring for those fears and trusting in the parts of us that are not afraid. Yeah, so a thing that's been coming through for me really strong in the last year-ish that I've been wanting to express and just not really sure when and how to say this, but like just this feeling of like, what good is the witch in the woods archetype when we could be creating a world right now where we're cultivating that kind of self-trust and self-validation and like together move in this world, no longer holding back because we're afraid of being silenced. And I think the witch in the woods archetype is gorgeous, super romantic, and really does speak to an internal process of going within. Like wherever you live in the world, you can be a witch in the woods in the sense that you learn how to cultivate this space to hear yourself. You learn how to cultivate a relationship where you're so in nature and you're so in the aliveness of the web all around you. You can have that anywhere. And Witch in the Woods does it does speak to this idea of being shut out and cut off from the polis or the community or the village, whatever, because you've been shut out. You're not allowed, like you live in the woods at risk, of losing your life. So what I'm wondering is, what would it be like for us to not do that anymore and just be very visible? And it's like, yeah, I'm going to be visible. I'm at the soccer fields. I'm in the carpool lines. I'm at the grocery stores. Here I am. You can feel it. You can feel it in me. And I'd love to talk to you about it, because could be you too. You have it in you. It's just wants to be talked to and listen, and wants you to listen, to clear these distortions, because they're hurting us, these distortions. That which is evil. It's a distortion to control and to silence. Yeah. So let me at this point share with you the voices of my dear friends. Everyone here came to me through my professional world, including my boyfriend's voice. These wonderful individuals who share their wisdom so generously with us. Most of them have been, I guess all of them have been in at least one of my course communities. Everybody here has been, I guess everyone but one has been a client. Some of these voices I've now known since I was a baby witch astrologer, and through some kind of web weaving, they found their way to me. I found my way to them. These voice memos make me want to cry. They're so beautiful. They're so fucking powerful. Thank y'all so much. I'm going to share more about each of them and how to connect to them in my show notes. So look there. Check out who they are, operating in the world as in their witchy selves. So we have Mariola Rosario, then Rebecca Paget, then Jonathan Coe, Samar Jade, Lisa Quigley, and then Matt Bull. And I will see you on the other side. Thank you.
I was born a witch. Of this, I have no doubt now. But the truth is, I've been actively and publicly referring to myself as a witch or a bruja for a few years now. Although I can trace a line back to the many versions of my younger self, my childhood self, my teenage self, well, especially the teenage self. Such power. And even back then, when I wasn't quote, identifying as a witch, I can see the many ways that witchcraft or witchdom had been guiding me and protecting me and showing me how to move in mysterious ways. And for me, there's something to that, right? To be a witch is to accept the invitation to move in mystery, to accept that mystery is a guide, can be a guide, mystery as companion, mystery as source. And when I say I was born a witch, I can also say that actually I named myself witch. I claimed this title for myself. No one did it for me. Nobody baptized me with this title, at least not that I know of or am aware of. It was really an act of autonomy, of agency, of embodied, heartfelt self-naming, an act of kind of rebellious independence. And also, it was really basic. It was really yeah, okay, you're a witch. This is who you've always been, and it's actually not that big of a fucking deal. But also I'm a Scorpio, so everything is a fucking big deal to me. It was not long ago that I also came to the realization that the term witch, in my experience, is it functions as the convergence of all these identities I had been carrying for so long, identities, labels, practices, such as being a feminist, being an artist, a teacher, a student, an astrologer, a seeker, a lover, a colonial subject, and also a decolonial thinker, a freak, a punk. All these identities that merged inside of me and merge inside of me and make me who I am, right? These things that fuel my fire, that sharpen my sword, my tongue, these things that move inside of me, this creative power, these things that connect me to the core of who I am and who I feel myself to be, even if there's lots of mystery there, even if I actually don't know what this is, right? It was the word witch that I felt was the only word that could encompass the magnitude of all these identities that swim inside of me and that make me who I am. And so with this, also the word witch, I associate it so much with the word artist, because I realized in this journey also that my quote, witch wound was also my artist wound. It was oozing from the same place, and actually it still oozes from time to time. This is my healing journey. None of this is has a end period. This is an ongoing thing. But the witch wound and the artist wound, right? They're both this ache of feeling shame around myself, my power, my desires, my weirdness, my voice. And of course, this all trickles down into insecurities around my creative life, my artist life. So this is something that I continue to work through. And one last thing I'll say about the word witch is that, to me, witch is linked to intention and attention. What in our lives do we want to put intention to, and what in our lives are we putting attention to both of these things at the same time. To be a witch, I think, is to be tuned in to this, right? What in our surroundings needs both intention and attention. And there's a lot of power in that. It also reminds me of just like being tuned into time as a spiral and not a linear thing. And perhaps this is also why we witches, we love the moon so much. The moon is our mistress, right? The moon is our witness. And the moon reminds us, I think, of the passage of time, but in a different way, right? In a non-capitalist, self-devouring way. And so the moon is our role model. And so what do we do with this word witch, right? What do I do with the word witch? And how does it live inside of me? What do I do with it? On a more practical level, right? What I do with my witch self, I leave her flowers. We light candles together. We connect with the earth. We rage together when the earth is being mistreated. We ache together. We also cook together. I don't think that there's an act that makes me feel closer to my witch self than cooking. And I think that this is linked to the women that I grew up with. And I have these memories of my grandmother cooking and going into her garden and gathering herbs and spices like cilantro and recao, which is a herb from Puerto Rico where I grew up. It's like very specific to this area, the smell of it. And so now I love to cook with herbs, like just putting like entire things of herbs in my beans and my stews. And again, cooking with intentionality. Like every time I put a herb inside of anything that I cook, I travel back to this memory with my grandmother. And so it reminds me, right, of the need and the desire to be intentional, even in a simple act such as preparing a meal, something that I do every day, multiple times a day. And one last thing I will say is that, witch and bruja, like it's not the same for everyone. While I've enjoyed watching and seeing the many depictions of witches in media, movies, etc., art, there's a part of me that never fully identified. Like, I don't look like that. That doesn't feel like me. I didn't grow up with this. For example, I now know that I grew up surrounded by witches, you know? I think all the women that I grew up with that were my caretakers were witches, but none of them wore pointy hats, right? Or big robes. Like, I grew up in the Caribbean. It's always like 90 degrees plus there. And so to me, like, the image of the witch is actually like someone that is gathering herbs and spices, right? It's like the image of my grandmother in the tropical climate and being intentional about it, right? So that's, I think, important, is that it's not a one size fits all type of situation. It goes without saying, but also I think it has to be said.
The word witch for me is definitely one that's taken a while for me to reclaim, know that it's a part of me, know that it's something that I believe is there for anyone that wants to touch into that space, cultivate that space within themselves. And yeah, for me, it's taken many years, and that's been my journey with it. I sort of needed the time to touch into some more mature parts of myself to really know that it's there and that it's really worth tending to. And so yeah, I feel like it's a space of tending and devotion to the creative spark that lives within all of us. I think there's just a particular energy when you are around someone that you know tends to this place. I experience it as something like deeply vibrant but internal within someone that just, no matter what, it just has this power in the amount of space that it takes up unapologetically. And I believe that's from the spending of the time there to cultivate it. For me, it's about my creative practices, really coming into that space, that fire space within myself of what is it do I deeply desire? What do I want to create from a very raw, authentic space, a space that feels wild, but also very, very grounded in the knowing of what's mine. And then when that comes then out to the exterior, there's this richness to the quality of it, because I think you can really feel that type of burning sensation when someone is spending time with something that they truly love and desire. And so, yeah, I think there's an experience when you feel it in the outside world. I have this one example. I was working at a retail job. I've had many of those, which is always fun to experience different kinds of people. And I had this, it was a high-end retail job, so there we would get celebrities and, people in that space coming into the shop regularly. And there was this one celebrity that came in, and he just had this really, really magical quality about him. It almost felt like a spell the whole way that he came into the space. And he had this coat on that kind of had like a draping to it, and it almost like when he would turn, it like swung around like a witch's cape, or a magical cape, magician. And it just added to this strong presence, this confidence that was like, yeah, I'm here, and this person was a musician. And so I believe this tending to that part of themselves, it just really gives this presence of magic, and that there's something else under the surface. There's something deeper. There's something truly unique happening with this person. Like they've tapped into that very unique, I believe being a witch is someone who's tapped into that very unique spark and space within themselves, and they're able to express it out unapologetically. And that was definitely the experience. I'll never forget this experience with this, with this musician that came in to buy some hand lotion for his wife. The whole thing was so magical. And just really, when they left the store, you're just kind of looking at your coworker like, holy shit, wow. Did that just happen? Like almost being transported, or like I said, like a spell to kind of take you hypnotically into their energy, into their world. And even though I didn't, they weren't playing a instrument in that moment, it's like you could really feel into almost the quality of what they would be doing because of their energy alone. So, yeah, I really love feeling that energy. I think it's, for me, it's been a really important place to tend to and to keep alive within myself. It really brings me into wanting to be here every day, and a reason to wake up in the morning, to tend to that fire, and keep moving towards being in my own true expression. So yeah, that's what the word witch means to me in this moment.
Hello, everyone. My name is Jonathan Coe. Some of you may know me from my podcast, Healing the Spirit, or maybe from my collaborations with Britton. When Britton shared this invitation to explore my relationship with the word witch, I felt this electricity running through me. We see this word a lot, I feel, in the last few years. And yet, right, the meaning is still very personal to each person. It's still emergent depending on where a person is at in their journey and in their exploration. And ultimately, perhaps the meaning is still mysterious. There's still a shroud, a cloud of mystery around this word. There's something about this word, about this concept, about this archetype that to me defies logic. It's like thinking about negative space or the void, right? What is the void? The void is everything else which is not tangible, right? Which is not easily categorized, which doesn't serve clearly defined functions, where maybe the connection between the input and the output isn't directly obvious. All of that to me feels like they belong to the void, right? Or what we conceptualize as the void. So in some ways, I have a similar body level knowing about the idea of being a witch. There's something about the witch archetype that is about tending to the liminal space, right? This is where, for me personally, the word and the archetype and the energy of witch differs from the magician, right? My brain, and I think, many of our brains work in contrasts, right? To me, contrasts are not binaries, right? Binaries mean you have to choose. You're either an A or a B, right? Contrast means things happen within a continuum. And so when we think about the magician end of the continuum, the magician works with techniques, with guarantees, right? With what feels like a solar exploration of how do I pull off this seemingly impossible task? How do I figure out the formula and then lay out the steps for others that I'm about to teach this formula to? To me, the magician cultivates relationships with their tools so that they know it inside out, so that they can rely upon their tools to give them the output that they need. The magician's ability to refine and to hone their craft such that others are in awe that the impossible is not only in fact possible, but can also be pulled off with relative ease or panache, right, is to me part of what it means to embody the magician within. The witch is a different energy altogether. To me, the witch befriends the mystery, which means there's no guarantee. Right? The witch may cultivate deep relationships with their tools, but the witch understands that the tools, the methods, the ingredients are all portals. And what about the destination? Who knows? Who knows, right? When one yields to being in service to the mystery, as the witch often does, one spends their precious life force energy not trying to yield a certain outcome, but rather to practice surrender that the mystery will provide. And when the mystery does not provide, perhaps there's an intelligence there, right? Perhaps it is intelligent of the mystery for the mystery to facilitate a decay, a transmutation, a melting away, a whisking away for the energy that's behind the original form to be recycled and repurposed into another form. So how does the witch surrender? The first phrase that came to me when I reflected on the idea of defining what it means to be a witch is that the witch is the one who weaves the web. The witch is able to trust, to surrender, because the witch was the one who wove the web in the first place, right? The witch knows that the web will hold because the witch wove the web. You know, the witch has cultivated this tactile, yet perhaps illogical or non-formulaic understanding of the web, and the witch has this visceral relationship with the web, right? The web is, of course, both metaphorical and real, right? The web is the quantum field. The web is the akasha. The web is the group field. The web is the network of humans and non-humans of this earth and out of this earth, kins caring for one another. Sometimes in sentimental ways, as in, perhaps the ways that one cares for a mother figure in one's life or a beloved pet, and other times caring in ways that are maybe less personal, right? The way that a tsunami makes way for the soil to be receptive to new species of plants that previously weren't there. This is all making me consider my own personal practice as someone who identifies, maybe first and foremost, as a mystic and as an artist, right? To me, the mystic and the artist also exist within this continuum. I feel like the mystic and the artist is constantly in dialogue, constantly in conversations about how to tap into that inner witch and inner magician, right? And how to adjust the percentage, of how much am I in my inner witch and how much am I in my inner magician, right? And the inner witch and the inner magician, to me, they're constantly dancing with one another. Sometimes they dance in ways that are collaborative, that gets them both closer to the same agenda. And sometimes they're pulling apart, creating tension, right? Creating something new from that fertile soil of tension. But to me, the real practice is, how do I cultivate a real, emergent, meaning moment by moment, and honest relationship with these 2 points within the continuum, right? With my inner witch and with my inner magician.
Hey, you. Gosh, the reflection on what it means to be a witch and my familiarity with it. So, honestly, I was always a witch. And I think that, well, actually, let me go back and talk about what I think being a witch means to me. I think being a witch is someone who lives and is very rooted in their power and their understanding of what is unique to them, and being rooted in the acceptance of all that makes you you, all of the what society would say is good, and then all of what society thinks is bad, that you are holding space for all of that and moving in that power. That to me is the crux of a witch. Um, and I think the way that that magic plays out for people is different. I think that for those of us who are conscious about our um and have named and are not afraid of or ashamed, or with whom the term witch is resonant, our magic is shows up in different ways. And for those that maybe don't claim the term witch or, magician, that magic is still there. It is still very much there. It's just like, you can't tell me that the way that Oprah moves in this world is not as a witch, regardless of whether or not she names herself a witch. She lives in her power. She walks within her power, and um it's beautiful to see. So I think that I've always known I've always been a witch. I've always been interested in um the earth and the elements, and being in my own inner world of uh creativity and intuition. And from a very young age, I was able to, I had access to the clairs, specifically like seeing, smell, and hearing. So that was always a part of my life, and I think there was a point at which I was afraid of it, because it was my experiences were not um, what everyone else experienced. And what I really needed was a community. I needed a community of witches, of people who were somehow touched by the moon and its radiant cycles, and um, could tell when things were going to happen before they happened, and could sense presence before the presence was there. Um, I think the only thing that has changed now is that I have a community of witches and magicians, and people working to be in their power. And that has made all the difference in my own practice. So, um, I personally wish that people would understand that the claiming of witch, of magic, of self is revolutionary, and that's why it's scary. That's why people shy away from it. The idea that you are in control of your own power, how dare you? How dare you? Um, but imagine what the world would be like if instead of this, the idea of power that we know right now, which is um, one party is oppressive over another. What if we walked in our power, our knowing, our selves, our that which makes us sacred and holy? What if we did that? What kind of world would we live in? What kind of world would could we create?
Hi, Britain, and all the incredible Moon to Moon listeners. My name is Lisa Quigley, and you can find me on Instagram as the Glitch Witch, or more accurately, the.glitch.witch. And a couple years ago, or I guess late 2019, is when I created my Instagram, which was going to be a place where I could just freely talk about all the witchy things that I was interested in. And so I didn't start off on there as the Glitch Witch, and I've had several iterations of names or handles on my Instagram, but they've all included the word witch. And so for this episode, Britton has asked me to talk about my thoughts on being a witch in this world today. And the word witch is a word that has been really meaningful to me for a long time, but it's also been a word that's been meaningful to me mostly in secret up until 2019 when I created my public witch Instagram. I guess I could say that a little bit before that I was like teasing the word out in different places, hinting at it, but that was the first time I created a place where I was like, yes, I'm a witch, and I'm going to try to at least have one area of my life where it won't be this big secret. So I grew up in a really fundamentalist religious home, and witchcraft was spoken about and taught to me as something that was like really evil and dark and scary. And yet I was also fascinated by witches growing up. I watched Bewitched, I watched Sabrina the Teenage Witch, I watched The Craft and Practical Magic and Charmed. Anything with witches was like, if it had witches in it, that was my number one go-to, was gonna watch this movie or show. And then later, as I was like not identifying or not going to church anymore at that early point, this is like probably 20 years ago when I was kind of first coming out of all that and kind of figuring out what did I believe, I was dating somebody actually who started talking to me, teaching me about like energy and meditation and things like this. And I was in the bookstore one day and I found a book called, I think it's called To Ride a Silver Broomstick. To Ride a Silver Broomstick by Silver Ravenwolf, which I think most witchy people, that might have been like one of the earliest books they discovered as well. And I was fascinated by this book. I took it home. Well, I bought it, obviously. And I'm reading this book. I'm inhaling it. I'm so enamored and fascinated by this fact that like there can be witches in real life. And it didn't really sound that scary or evil the way it had been taught to me. The hard part about when this point in my life, when I had discovered this book and like really inhaled it and thought like, yes, this is what I see myself as, is at that point in time, like I'm reading all these instructions and all these spells and all these like things that are telling you how to be a witch and like the things you can do and the whatever. At that time I was like 18 or 19, and I didn't have a lot of money. I was waiting tables, and I thought, well, this is really neat and awesome, and this is what calls to me, but I don't have money for all this stuff. And I felt like I couldn't be a witch because I couldn't afford to be a witch. I couldn't afford to go buy a bunch of crystals and buy a bunch of stuff. And I kind of equated it to that. And I was always from then on like following the threads of the witch, and the witch was still lighting me up, but I didn't feel like I had a right or the ability to claim it because I didn't have like a beautiful altar, and I didn't have like all these like witch supplies that I thought you had to have. So, we'll fast forward a bit. I'm like learning different like healing modalities, and I'm exploring my curiosities around like what we might call like natural healing and things like yoga and Eastern religion, and really just spending all those years unpacking my own religious issues and trauma and things like that, and kind of figuring out, well, what do I believe and what ideas do I resonate with? And there was, this is like really fast forwarding in time because I don't have a lot of space here, but there was a time I was in my late 20s, and I was dealing with some really challenging things, and I was kind of at the end of my rope with this specific issue that I was dealing with, and I just got into the ocean. This is when I lived in California. I was at the beach. I got into the ocean, and the waves, I just kind of like was like swimming in the waves, but also letting the water wash over me and like going under the waves and really feeling the salt water. And I just started praying to the ocean and praying to this salt water and this entity that is the ocean. I just started speaking to this entity and saying, please help me with this issue. Please take it from me. Please help me to move through this and help me to see it in a new way. And from that moment on, the issue I was dealing with started to dissolve, and I shifted and was able to relate to this this thing I was going through in a completely new way. And it was in that moment that I realized that I was a witch just by being. I was a person who spoke to the ocean and trusted the ocean to help me with my problem that I was going through. I was a person who could talk to birds and lay on the grass and feel the heartbeat of the earth. And I realized like I am a witch just by my who I am, and I don't have to do anything to prove I'm a witch or buy anything to prove I'm a witch. And I really think for me that's the importance of the witch in this modern time, is that we're not these like these people bent over cauldrons, witch in the woods. And I love the witch in the woods trope. It's so fun. But like I'm a witch when I'm cooking dinner for my family. I said this once in The Magician's Table with Britain, but I'm a witch when I'm on the couch drinking a beer. I'm a witch just because the force of nature moves through me, and I am nature, and I am electricity, and I am weird, and I am wondrous, and all of these things. And witch is just a word that, even though I don't feel, in a lot of ways, I don't actually feel like I match the visual of a witch. I don't do a lot of the things witches are supposed to do. I'm not very good at keeping track of witchy holidays, although I like to like read about them and things like that, and do my own little small things to mark things like the solstice when I can. But like, it's just, to me, it's about a state of being, and that when I speak this word witch and I use it about myself, something in me comes alive, and it helps me to express in the way that is very unique to me. So I don't know if this fully answers any kind of question, but it's really, to me, about like being who I am and who I came here to be. And that's really what the word witch means to me. And I've thought about using other words, and I do sometimes, like words like mystic or healer, but it feels really important to me to keep witch because yeah, I don't match the traditional, whatever that means, vibe of what a witch is. I don't have cauldrons all over my house. I do have a lot of tarot cards, and I do have more crystals than I had at that younger time in my life. But I'm not like a witch in the sense that most people might think of it, and I think that that's why I love it, because it creates this cognitive dissonance in a way of like what a witch is allowed to be, and what do witches look like, and what do witches wear, and what do witches eat, and how do witches talk, and all of these things. So that's something that's extremely important to me, and why I keep using and like claiming this word witch so proudly.
The word witch came home to me through Britain. It was definitely not a word I thought to apply to myself before she did. Um, and in fact, it was a terrifying word for most of my life. I remember not even that long ago, whenever Robert Eggers' The Witch came out, the trailer for that movie um, destroyed me. Like, could not sleep at night, because even though I wasn't in that belief system anymore, the idea that there was true evil and power and terror in the world wrapped up with that word still kind of had a hold on me. So it's wild to me that I even entertain a self-identity adjacent to the word witch now. But it was a journey to get to this place, despite the fact that I realize now, always sort of walked this path, being in advertising. I make, logos and brands and slogans for clients, which is essentially, sigil work and spell work, private labors designed to secretly create a public change in the world, which is witchcraft. I don't think that's by accident. But I don't. I wouldn't have gotten here without some deeply strange confrontations with the mystery behind everything. Very brief example would be another movie. When the movie Prometheus came out, which was the sequel to, it was the prequel to Alien. It wasn't a great movie, but I was obsessed with, I could sense that there was an esoteric subtext that felt important, and I spent an entire weekend privately wrestling with what this movie meant. And my son, who was 4 at the time, who I did not discuss this with, but I was reading a book out loud, and he climbed up on my lap and looked me dead in the eyes and goes, "Brave Prometheus, brave Prometheus, brave Prometheus." 3 times in a row, I swear to you. I dropped the book. I asked him, "What did you just say?" And he goes, "I don't know." And I said, "Why did you say it?" He said, "I don't know." And that was a stepping stone into, the question of what do I do with moments like this, which began to be more and more frequent, and build on each other and reference each other, began to haunt me. And what I now realize is that witchcraft is a practice in self-trust, because the systems and powers of the world, and belief systems that we are offered, don't have anything to say about moments of mystery, of deep, strange, peculiar mystery like those. And the only way to stare that mystery in the face is with enough self-trust to risk madness, to confront something unknowable and to walk toward it with no hope or expectation of understanding, and knowing in advance that reason doesn't apply, and that intuition is the only tool we have for progress, whatever progress means in this context. And I think in that sense, the cultural programming around fearing the witch is by design, because the systems of power and control that are in place can't function in a world where everyone operates from deep, unshakable self-trust. So that's why I'm here, why I'm still going.
Wow, huh? Thank y'all. You know, I've said it before, but when I was in the period when I was separated, not divorced yet, but not married either, it's the liminal space. This is the time of my life when I began to study with the moon and find teachers who talk about the moon. Astrology rolled in this period, in the tarot. Certainly witch was guiding the way. And I felt so much moving away from me, but I also felt as these things moved away from me that were old, dissolving identities and attachments, I was feeling something really solidifying in me and really rooting in me. And I had this vision of like, I'm alone now in this. I'm alone here now with this power growing inside me. And I wonder about connecting to other people, other spirits and bodies called humans, and the non-human, that might magnetize to this thing I feel solidifying inside of me if I howl from that place inside of me, up, alone in the woods, up toward the moon. Would people hear that? Would they come? And all of those individuals that you just heard from are some of the, who even knows how many people now, that have heard me from that place inside myself that I was tending to and stoking, just putting like a lot of energy in this place inside myself, which to me is like a cauldron inside of myself. And then acting in the world, speaking in the world, living in the world from the cauldron that you tend to so lovingly. It's like miraculous to me that this has all happened, but it has. And something mysterious has been guiding that. And I know everyone out there who connects to this feels that the unfolding happens for them too. It is what magic is. These weavings from putting our energy, where we want to put it, beginning with the cauldron inside of ourselves. So, if I want to say, if you're thinking, I wish I could be like that, or I wish I had that in me, or there's a longing or a wish, I want what that sounds like. I just really am not trying to be hokey when I say it is already in you. It's always been there. It's a cauldron inside of you that you tend to. And you're the only one that can do that, That's the tricky part, is taking in that responsibility. And also, there are things you can do to help you train and grow skills and grow practices and grow language, daily rituals, things that you can do to help you feel this part of you inside of yourself that is going to be the one who tends to that cauldron inside, And we have broken teachings, but we can weave it again, And a lot of what Moon to Moon is going to be about, the podcast is about this, but the class is about this too, is finding our way back into the part of us that already knows how to do this. It's already there. So, I want to bring forward some of the themes that are floating around. I'm sure, dear listener, that you're probably already thinking about there's kind of a repeat theme around this, or we're hearing this from several different people, this idea about such and such. And so, I'm going to put on my teacher hat, my Hierophant life card, and name some of these. It's soothing to me. Maybe it'll be soothing to you. Maybe it will be helpful. So, a theme that I feel we have heard now from several, including myself, is there being a kind of delay in claiming that's related in some way to fear, or a sense of can't do that. Or maybe it's just as simple as not having a guide, not having encouragement, not having invalidation. Those are all great reasons why there would be a delay in some kind of self-knowing, And so the fear and the fascination with which that had years of not receiving your attention are part of the intelligence of the campaign against witches, and the desires of our younger selves to not do things to get ourselves ostracized. That's intelligent. But the fear mongering around this word must be named, so that it can begin to be cleared, because we can't begin to clear something unless we're willing to see how it exists. There was a lot of theme around the relationship between the artist and the witch. Themes around creativity, stoking fire, cooking, cultivating these practices of intention and attention, as Mariola was saying so beautifully, around caring and listening and really like weaving this web with your attention and intention to create. And you're like playing with a fire within that becomes a fire outside of you. And I feel like from what I've seen in this world, that because in many ways artists are outside of like center culture in many ways. Artists, but I would also say queer folks. I would also say divorced folks. These are types of people, I would say, that if you have already undergone like whatever you need to do to self-validate in our culture that will invalidate you by naming yourself as an artist, or by naming yourself as queer, or by naming yourself as like someone who doesn't want to be married. Even if you get married again, like divorce is an initiation into releasing yourself from certain kinds of safety that came from being validated by being married the first time. If you can move through those initiations, it's like you're already getting closer to the witch inside of yourself. And so witch like appears maybe more easily or like more naturally for those who have moved through those initiations of self-validating. So if you don't consider yourself one of those three, you haven't been divorced and you're married. You don't call yourself queer. You don't think of yourself as an artist. It would make sense that there's like more initiations that you will need to take yourself through to get closer to witch, because you just haven't had to already do it for those other things, is what I feel. If you're someone who has refused a marriage already, well, then you are closer to witch, because going through some of these like socially set up thresholds to get yourself safety and security as like a person who's decent at adulting, person who's really following rules well. If you do these things that create proof that you follow these social norms well, then whatever attachments that you have to that safety and security are going to be attachments that will want to be confronted and questioned as you get closer to getting to know the witch inside of yourself. These are things that I found. And as you do that, you self-validate, and the self-validating and the pleasure of self-validating stokes that creative fire. I think another theme that we can talk about then from there is this idea of witnessing your own uniqueness, centering your uniqueness, loving how you're not like everyone else. Really letting yourself feel and see and know and hear how unique your frequency is. This is part of that flame. This is part of that fire that comes through out in the world. At the end of my last episode, I was talking about how the Queen of Wands as an energy that becomes externalized just very naturally in this moon-to-moon path, this moonlit path. And that's because all of that inner work, all of that inner quiet solo tending to self helps you really understand your uniqueness and give it your attention and intention. And then that uniqueness is then externalized. So the degree to which you have had conditioning not to draw attention to yourself, the degree to which you've had conditioning that's like, who do you think you are being unique? or that like if you heard a lot of judgment and you heard a lot of gossip around people who did kind of against the grain things, the more fear you may have that you will be the object of gossip and of judgment if you were to let people see how freaky and weird and unique you are, right? So part of the witch path feels like a lot of letting people experience us and letting people have their own experience of how unique we are. And we're cultivating the capacity to just let people have those reactions to us by doing that inner work. The inner work facilitates greater capacity to being misunderstood, to being judged, to being gossiped about. Yeah, and then all of that leads then to self-trust. Self-trust being a massive, maybe the most repeated theme that I come upon in like what is witch. It is like but to me it's like as within so without. Like it's self-trust, but it's also trust in the web outside of you. That as Jonathan put it, the web will hold. That was so beautiful. This idea that as you build that trust in yourself, so you're trusting that even if it's unfolding in ways that you didn't want it to, like nobody showed up to the thing I put out there. That there's even trust that there is an intelligence to it not happening the way that you thought it would. That's how much you even trust it. That is how much you trust it. That there is an intelligence to all the timing, which is what I talk about in emergence astrology. That's as above, so below, just trusting that there is an intelligence and it is actually loving. And this is how, as Rebecca and I were talking about, trusting in intuition, trusting into the cyclical moonlit way helps you trust in death, such that when it's your time, as Rebecca so beautifully was saying last week, that you don't have to be afraid of it. And like that's the ultimate trust in the web, is trusting that like when this particular iteration of your spirit has to go, that there's this larger unfolding that's mysterious. It's so mysterious. I'm going to get back to the mystery in just a second, because there's another piece here, which is the revolutionary aspect of self-trust. And this was really brought up by Samar, who said magic is revolutionary, and that's scary. How dare you, right? And as Matt said, the cultural programming around fearing the witch is by design, because the systems of power and control that are in place can't function in a world where everyone operates from deep, unshakable self-trust. Thank you, Matt. And so, as Matt put it, enough self-trust to risk madness, because there's no hope in understanding. Like that is some serious trust, right? But how do you do that when your inner children are so loud and all these parts of you are freaking out because of our scarcity programming? Because your inner manager is like, what? I need a job, That's a huge part of what we're going to be doing in the course, is learning how to work with your younger selves. Because you can't make them go away. They're going to be afraid of this trust business, of this witch business, of this moonlit path. And so guess what? There are tools and practices, and it is just something that you learn to get more skilled at helping yourself hold your younger selves. So it's revolutionary. this witch. This is, to me, one of the biggest reasons the word witch is distinct from, say, mystic, which is another word that I love to be connected to. Because the word witch has a distinctly political component to it. I don't mean politics like just like Democrat, Republican. I mean like power dynamics. Power. Who's in power here? Where is power? How is power operating? The witch inside of you is not afraid to look away from the way power is playing out, and is not going to not speak what you see in order to be nice, in order to be easy, in order to be pleasing. You see how power is being played out, and you're not going to not speak that if you feel called to, you know? And so there's a revolutionary aspect to self-trusting, because you're not ceding, C-E-D-I-N-G, you're not ceding the trust you could be putting in yourself and in the mystery web into institutions. You're not thinking that the government's good is always going to be good and take care of you. You're not thinking that all textbooks, they're inherently good. You know, you're not thinking that systems like the church or like marriage are all don't have complications in terms of power. So being witch is being willing to be disruptive a bit or a lot. Because it's like, don't silence me. I see what's going on here. I'm not saying throw away the institution of marriage, but there's a lot about that institution that needs to be discussed for me to go anywhere near it. We have to recognize histories of power dynamics and the ways that we relate to that institution that have to do with staying safe because of power. So, let me get back to mysteries. This is the final point that I feel like really came forward in our conversation here. Is there's something about witch that has to do with the confrontation with mystery, moving in and with mystery, surrendering to mystery. And as Mariola was saying, the moon is our guide here. The moon, Mariola said, the moon is our mistress. The moon is our witness. The moon is our role model. The moon is a loving teacher, caregiver. The moon helps guide the way. And there's the moon that's out there, and then there's the moon inside of yourself. And working with the actual moon helps support the aliveness and the trust that you can have of that inner moon. The inner moon being your connection to your own inner voice, your self-trust. Intuition is self-trust. So growing intuitive practices is how to grow self-trust. And self-trust is what is most lost from shame. So It's all connected, y'all. It's all connected. I feel complete. Let me just say a few more things here. Such a rich space to be inside. What I just heard myself say is, I love my life. I love my life. I do. I love my life. How cool to sit and contemplate these things, feel these things, live these things, discuss these things, share these things. Once again, if you're hearing this on August 28th, Monday, it is the last day to get early bird pricing, but it's not the last day to join Moon to Moon. That would be September 10th, because we begin September 11th. But the sooner you get your registration in, the sooner I can ship you the Moon to Moon workbook, because that is the required text for the class. That's my workbook. If you don't currently own it, when you register, there's going to be different price points depending on if you have the workbook or not. I did this because I didn't want to automatically build it in, because there's lots of people that already have the workbook. They don't need another one. So pick the price point with the workbook if you don't own it yet. And don't wait till September 10th, just so that you can, why don't you just go ahead and register? This is being nice to your nervous system. Go ahead and register. Let me ship you the book. Then you can cozy up with the book at night before we start meeting. You can begin the daily practices that I'm inviting you into. You can get everything in your calendar. You can get your special pen you might want to use. Maybe you want to create a space in your home where you're going to do things, pray, meditate, create, I don't know. You can begin to prepare yourself for this self-tending the sooner you tell yourself, yes, we're doing this. That's my little encouragement to the part of you that wants to say yes, because you know what? Saying yes to this kind of thing isn't always logical. I like to help you know the logical reasons why this would be a good thing for you, because I appreciate the logical brain and I would love to appeal to it. But when we're talking about mystery and being web weavers and being able to know your way in the dark, a lot of that's just not super logical. And so some of you may have a yes and you don't know how you can explain it to yourself or other people. And I totally honor that. I've been there. And just want to say that like that can be a first step, is like honoring this yes can be the beginning of showing your intuitive self that you're listening to it and that you don't need all the pros laid out in a column, All right, then, if you have any questions or comments or confusions or frustrations about this episode, I'd love to hear them. Send me an email. And I'll have the links to register for the class. I'll have the link to the Moon to Moon workbook if you just want to get the workbook and not do the class. Other things coming up, Unshaming the Signs Virgo is going to be Tuesday, the 19th of September. I love Virgo, so I'm really excited to get into that material. I'll have a link for that. I have a super secret offering that's coming up for business witches. Those of you who are receiving money for your magical work, and you would like to learn how to be in relationship to your practice so that you grow visibility, make more money, feel more potent and powerful in what your offering is and who it's for, where you want to like work on some money wounds and self-trust so that you can find more people to give your gifts to, I'm going to have a small group circle gathering around this. I already have several people, but that's going to start late September. I'm going to talk about it more next week, but if you're like listening, can you tell me more? Just shoot me an email. You won't be under any obligation to commit by sending me an email, but I'll be able to tell you more about it so you can start thinking about whether you want that on your calendar. Anything else? Yeah, I guess the last thing I would just say is be gentle with yourself. As I mentioned at the beginning, this Astro's some days wonky, some days very spiky, some days very soupy, some days very funny and trickster. It's kind of like a different day every day right now. But definitely I'm seeing a lot of uncomfortable things happening for folks, especially relationally. Divorce is up, relational endings are happening. You know, we're in a Venus retrograde. I encourage you to go back to my conversation with Matt, my boyfriend, Matt Bull, about, but what if it isn't bullshit? We share about breaking up in the last Venus retrograde and have like an open conversation about relational discomforts and relational spikiness and relational trust issues and projection. And then in the last 25 minutes, I talk about Venus retrograde solo, just to give some supportive words, any astro guidance that might be helpful to you if you're navigating relational difficulties right now. And especially as those relational difficulties may show up through communication, misunderstandings, miscommunications, reactivity communication, because we also have a Mercury retrograde. And the Venus retrograde is currently being governed by the Mercury retrograde. And for astro nerds, this is because, of course, Venus retrograde is in Leo, and Leo is ruled by the sun. And previously, the sun was in Leo, its own sign. But then it shifted now to Virgo. So now that sun that's watching over the Venus retrograde is itself being governed by Mercury retrograde. So there's sort of like an extra wonk that's come in. And now Mars is just into Libra. And Libra is governed by Venus, and Venus is retrograde, and Venus is governed by the sun, which is governed by Mercury retrograde. So there's a lot of personal planet wonk. So, yeah, it's not a comfortable time. So encouraging you to take space, slow it down. If there's any way to slow things down, slow things down. If there's any way to delay responding. Doesn't mean you can't make choices. Doesn't mean you can't sign contracts. It just, there does not need to be urgency here. Especially emotionally governed urgency is probably not going to feel wise or loving big picture. Or to your future self, there's high degree of regret possible right now, the more we react impulsively and emotionally. We're just, no shame, this is what we're learning. It's bringing up patterns that help us see what we're ready to now heal, you know? Like where are those triggers rooted? What's the old story? What parts of you need more love and compassion? Yeah. So be gentle. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Please leave a rating or review if you haven't. I always ask. And until next time, cheers.